Welcome to the Ask Faleskini podcast with a guest. I'm proud to present Jeff Holman. Jeff is an engineer, attorney, a master of business administration, and founder of Intellectual Strategies. Jeff, welcome to the show. Please tell us more about yourself.
I will. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I don't know that my background is too exciting, but it's probably helpful to know where I've come from to give some context to what we're going to talk about. As you mentioned, I started off in engineering. I went into law. I always wanted to go into business, so I got my MBA. And I've really transitioned over time from working with kind of big companies to small companies where I feel like I can be impactful. And so there's this thread throughout my career that's gone like this in a very fun and exciting way that's kind of led me to where it's at. It's been purposeful and intentional. I'm happy to dive into it anywhere you want.
Okay, I would like to talk about midlife crisis and how the lack of strategy, too much tactics, too much trial and error, uh, too much speculation leads to midlife crisis, and how the solution to midlife crisis, regardless if it is at home or if it is in our companies, are the strategies. So we have to think about how we're going to use our intellectual property. We have to think how we're going to employ our powers. And I'm a strong believer that what we do in our private life is somehow copied in our business. So midlife crisis in our private life is reflected in our business. What are your experiences with midlife crisis and how you help your clients solve that through your intellectual strategies?
It's a very insightful question. And you've just asked a question that takes me back to the career crisis that I had that led me, to where I am today, to be honest. I practice in a way right now that I think is very sustainable as a business. It's good for my clients, it's good for my team, but it wasn't always that way, right? When I was a younger attorney, I was helping clients like IBM and Intel get lots and lots of patents to put into their portfolio. And just for context, a company like IBM for 40 years was the number one patent grantee in the US, right? And they were getting around 7,000 patents a year, which is, I guess I should do the math here. Was that like 20 a day that they're getting granted on average throughout the entire year for like 40 years? And I was helping them get patents. And one day, probably in 2012, I said to myself, this I'm helping IBM do what they need to do, but I want to make more impact. I had this moment where I questioned in my career life, how do I do something more purposeful? And I saw, because I was working with some of these smaller companies and garage inventors and such, and I saw that when I helped them get a patent, they wanted to show up to my office. They wanted to celebrate. They bring little cups, and I'm in Utah where alcohol is kind of less popular maybe for some circles. And so they'd bring their sparkling cider and some cups and they'd be like, Jeff, let's celebrate. We got our patent, or we got our patent filed, or we got our trademark. And it was so exciting for them. It meant so much to them to get that. And I thought, this is really where I want to go. And that led me in a business setting through this part of this winding course that I've been down over the last 15 or so years, which, just for some highlights, I started to say, okay, how like intellectual property can make a big difference in a business like a small company. How do I understand intellectual property strategy better so I can serve my clients better? And that led me to say, well, IP strategy is just like marketing strategy and any other strategy in a business. It's all part of business strategy. And then if you've ever looked at business strategy, and this is about the time I said, hey, I'm going to go get my MBA. I'm going to study strategy for like academically, in addition to what I'm doing with my clients. And I went and got my MBA, and I bought all these books, and I read all this stuff about strategy. Several are on my shelf down there. And I realized there's not really a good easily applied definition for strategy. If you look at strategy, you listen to podcasts about it, people have these wild ideas that, how do we not have one easy definition for strategy, right? Like, do I want to apply this one or this one or this one and and so it was confusing. It wasn't really helpful. I mean, the tools could be helpful, but I have an engineering background and I want to be like, how does the system work, right? There needs to be some fundamental rules of the system, not just a bunch of rules that I have to decide when to pick and choose them. And so that led me to creating my own plan individually to get my MBA, to go to a general practice firm and study more about business law generally, in addition to the patent stuff that I was doing, to become a general counsel at a company where I could, really be, influential in the leadership of that company. And that all led to where I'm at today. And so the short of it is this: in order to help me apply everything I've learned to my clients, I ultimately had to come up with my own framework because there wasn't one that was consistently applicable and broadly applicable across the board to different companies. So I said, well, there's got to be something. Why don't I just create it? So I've come up with this 5-factor framework for business strategy. And I say all of this because I think that there's a direct correlation between the way that businesses think about strategy, where they're going, what they're trying to achieve, how they, what resources they have, and how they use those resources to accomplish those goals. I think there's a direct correlation between that and what we as individuals could do. So when we're dealing with midlife crisis, right, we're like, hey, whoa, step back. I think I want to do something more intentional with my life or whatever. Like, where do we turn for that? I think there's a way to take this 5-factor framework for businesses and probably apply it in a very similar way with a few, customizations maybe to what we do as individuals, so that we can be purposeful, intentional, and sustainable. I think that's why a lot of people get into midlife crisis, right? They're like, hey, wait a second, I've been going down whatever path. Maybe it's a great path, but it's too intense, right? Maybe it's a bad path and you got to get off of it. But you're like, I got to do something with my life that, one, I like, and two, is sustainable for the longer term. And those are, in a way, that's business strategy. I got to do something with my business that works, that, I'm passionate about, and that people out in the market want. But I have to do it in a way that leverages the talents and resources that I have, and in a way that's sustainable over time. If I don't, I'm not really being strategic. I'm just, maybe being tactical, or maybe just taking action to take action, right? So that's a long answer that kind of goes from where I started with that question, maybe 13 years ago or so, and said, well, I think I want to do a different direction with my practice, my professional practice, to saying, I think there's a way to apply this similar framework to what we do as individuals.
I just love how you solved your midlife crisis in your business and went from questioning yourself, questioning the purpose and where is that going, into finding purpose, finding clarity, finding your own mission. And of course, because there was nothing in the market at that time, you have, let's say, engineered your 5-factor framework that is applicable to other businesses. I think that's the best possible solution to midlife crisis. So how would you recommend that our listeners should apply this 5-factor framework to their businesses?
Yeah, let's if you don't mind, I'll talk about the 5 factors, and then let's you and I maybe uh figure that out together a little bit. You're gonna help me apply this, okay? Um, so the 5-factor framework for business strategy is, and some of this is going to seem really rudimentary, but I'll point out a few things that I think are important, right? Number one, so there's 5 factors. So business strategy is a plan to deploy valuable resources uh, toward, for a sustainable advantage toward a business objective in a competitive environment. So you have a plan. That's not surprising. You have to, nobody talks about strategy without having a plan or a goal or something like that. So you have a plan to deploy your valuable resources. I think that's an area where a lot of people don't necessarily bring into their strategy. What are the valuable resources? When I'm talking about business clients, I'm talking about, their team, their IP, their patents, their trademarks, maybe their relationships, their customer, like all those could be valuable resources. So how do you a plan to deploy those valuable resources for a sustainable advantage? Sustainability is key. A lot of times we take actions and we're like, we're going to do a sprint and achieve this thing. Well, that's different from a sustainable practice in your business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's key, and that carries over personally. The fourth factor was this all has to be directed for a business, toward a business leadership objective. And what do I mean by that? I mean, businesses need to be aiming for a leadership position in their industry. If you're not, then you're not really talking about strategy. You're just talking about, hey, I'm going to, I've got a goal to go sell $1 million worth of widgets over the next 6 months. That's great. That's fine. That's respectful, but it's not strategy. If you're not talking about a sustainable advantage toward a business leadership objective, and a business leadership objective typically in really broad terms comes down to two things for businesses, right? It's cost leadership, meaning you control your costs so well that you can essentially underprice everybody else in the market while still maintaining an acceptable margin, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what Costco Costco sort of does it. This is what Walmart does, right? Like Walmart is a cost leader. It maybe seems backwards for some people to what you think it is. It's the controlling your costs to maintain the lowest price while still making a margin, because other people who can't control their costs as well can't match your price. Therefore, they either have to charge a higher price and not get as much market share, or they have to charge the lower price but not get as much profit, right? So there's cost leadership, and then there's what I call market or brand leadership. And this is the other end of the spectrum. This is the Apples who have created such brand value that you can charge premium prices and because people are attracted to your brand. And so if you're a business, to be strategic, you have to be working towards one of these leadership positions, and there are different variations of them, but generally work towards a leadership position. And then of course, all of this is happening. The fifth factor is it's all happening within a competitive environment. So that's the business version of the 5-factor strategy framework. I'll pause there for a second so I don't just keep talking on and on and on like I have a tendency to do sometimes as an attorney. So let me pause there for a moment.
Yeah, so for me, is extremely useful what you have explained, and I would invite you that we try to apply that to a personal brand or to personal goals, because I believe as a competitive individuals who are going down the path of self-development or individualization, according to Jung, we want to be our best selves. We want to go through our traumas. We want to go through our grudges and forgive them. And we want to go through our fears and overcome them. And all that in order to be able to execute this 5-factor framework for ourselves, not just as a company, but also as individuals. I do believe in our world today where we're all equal, or there's a lot of equalization. It's important to stand out. And as a company without a plan, they're just looking at have enough margin to go through the month. It's same with individuals. If we don't have a plan, we're just drifting apart. And if we don't have a goal, every way that or every path that we walk on, it's good because we don't have a goal. And we
Yes.
don't have a direction in life or in business if we don't have a strategy. So I think for individuals who are ready to work on themselves, this five-factor framework would also apply. And now I would
Yeah.
invite you that we try to apply that to personal brand, that someone, regardless if they have their own company or if they are working in a bigger company where they have to develop personal brand in order to be competitive, for to stay on their position or either advance in their position towards C-level or more senior positions. How would you recommend that midlifers apply your framework to their jobs? You were part of a big company in the past. How would you do that?
Yeah, I love everything you've said. You've really put it in context, right? The issues that come into play for individuals. And I hope I'll try to reference back to some of what you've said as we go through this. And then for your audience, just so that it's totally clear for them, they're getting the inside view in a live workshop right now as we do this. This might be the first time I've given a lot of thought, but this might be the actual first time when I've vocalized how to apply this five-factor business strategy framework to personal. So, and I'm super excited to do it with you. So one of the things that I do, we got the five factors. When I apply these five factors to a business, and we're going to do the same thing today to individually, I like to go backwards. I listed it. It's a plan to deploy resources toward a sustainable advantage for a business leadership position in a competitive environment. We're going to go backwards now to apply that. So first of all, you mentioned people who are working like in a business setting, for example, how do they be more strategic? And I think we have to define what our environment is that we're in. Competitive might not be the right word, but environment is definitely applicable here. So for me, I look at my life and I say, well, which aspect of my life am I trying to be strategic in? And I don't want to say I'm just going to be strategic in every aspect, because that's hard to do. So for me, I could pick, well, am I talking about my role as a husband, right? I've been married for 30 years and I've learned a lot and have a lot left to learn and certainly improve in ways. Am I talking about that environment? Am I talking about the environment as a father? I have 4 kids, 2 are out of the house, 2 are still in the house. Is that my environment? Is it my environment, as a business owner or participate on the team within the business that we run? Is it maybe within a religious organization or a community organization? So we have to pick our environment, right? And we do that so that we can simplify this, because there's no way to get back up to the top and just say, let's make a plan until we've figured out these other pieces, and then we put the plan in place at the end. So what's our environment that we're working in? For now, let's talk about a work environment, right? We're just as a hypothetical, we're going to place ourselves in a work environment. Great. The next step, working backwards, is a business leadership objective. In this case, we'll call it a personal leadership objective. What is the personal leadership objective or role that you want to develop in that environment that we just chose? So in that business environment, if it's me and I'm looking at my environment, I started this law firm, I run it with a small team of attorneys and admins. What's the leadership role that I want, either within my team or within the broader context of the clients that I work with and the community that I'm in? One of the things that I've done recently is I've made it kind of the reason I'm here on this podcast and other podcasts, in part, is I've tried to make it one of my missions, essentially, to help everybody else know about this fractional legal team approach to legal services for small and scaling companies. And so you could say that personally and professionally, I've chosen my business or my personal leadership objective, and that is to be seen as an expert about how to provide legal services to small businesses and scaling companies in the most effective way possible. And it's not the traditional way. It's a new way that, through fractional services. We can dive into that later if you want to, but that's what applies to me. So I've got my environment is my professional environment. I've got my leadership objective is to be seen as a leader, throughout the community. to regarding, how to provide services to clients. Okay, so those are the first two. I'll pause there. Any questions or feedback or lack of clarity that we might want to address here?
No. You've been perfectly clear. So let's just
Okay.
continue. I'm looking forward to sustainable advantage. That would be a hard one.
Okay. So that happens to be where we're at, right? A sustainable advantage. This is, let me give some context here, because in my business, so you're getting my application, which is kind of a crossover between my personal and my business, because in my personal life, my business is overlaps with personal quite a bit, right? Just for context, I've been running my own firm since 2007 with some short stints working in other environments. And my wife works with me. She runs our law firm, essentially the COO of the law firm. She does a fantastic job. So our personal life is very intertwined. I have a daughter who works with me now too, and she's over customer experience. And so personal and business to me merge quite a bit. Now, your gut reaction to that might be, oh, that sounds like burnout mode, right? Because that's when you can't because that's one of the kind of maybe the symptoms of burnout is you can't separate personal and business a lot of times. So what I would say to that is that's what has made it even more important for me as a business owner who allows the business aspects to cross over into personal so much. Sustainability is absolute key. Without it, I would definitely be burning out, right? And I have my moments. I celebrate wins with the team and with my clients, and I have moments when I'm like, man, is there a better way, right? So we all do that, but sustainability is key. So what I did with my business is I did two things, and I looked at how businesses have been, how law firm businesses are typically run, and I said, first of all, the way law firm businesses are typically run, they lead to burnout. I've seen so many of my friends burn out. In fact, I've had friends, I've been to lunch over the years. I graduated from law school in 2005, and I've had lunch with, friends over the years and consistently heard, I'll bet 90% of the people that I went to law school with, that I stayed in touch with, do not like what they do. They hate it. And they're just simply staying in it because they make enough money or because they don't have any other options to pursue. And so they stick with it, even though they're miserable in their professional life. And I'm like, that is not, for me, that is not any way to like live your life. You're at work so much. Why would you not want to do it in a way that you like it? So the way traditional law firms are run often leads to unsustainable practices. We hear about lawyer burnout all the time, mental health issues, addiction issues, all these things in the law. We hear about it a ton. I don't know if everybody else hears about it the same amount
Like
that we do.
over 50% of our clients are legal professionals from US, so experiencing midlife crisis and burnout.
And they're coming to you because they've hit the wall, right? And they need some type of outlet or some type of, hey, get me pointed in the right direction in their life. So sustainability is it, that's one of the things you always hear about: sustainable, competitive advantage, sustainable advantage in strategy. And you should, because that's key. It's not the only key. The other things we listed are key too, but sustainability is critical. Now, what that means for me, right, is I've said I don't want to simply rebuild the same type of law firm business that exists, because I don't think it's sustainable from a personal standpoint. People burn out. Additionally, I don't think those businesses are sustainable from truly sustainable from a business standpoint, because sustainability to me in a business setting means that business can continue to run even when there are, changes and modifications. Like you have protected that business so it can continue going even when there's trouble, let's say. And so trouble in a law firm means, one of the main partners who's brought all the clients on decides to leave. And when they decide to leave, traditionally what happens, every single client that they've ever had goes with them. And that, I mean, that's the most major disruption to a law firm you can have besides maybe death, in the partnership. And so, in fact, some attorneys would probably rather that a partner died than that they took their clients with them. But I'll, I won't go down that path.
Can I just push you a bit towards an answer? I know it's not fair, but I'll push you.
Yes. Okay.
Would you say that in order to get sustainable advantage, it's a must to set the right boundaries and to be flexible with these boundaries in order to be sustainable?
Yes, I think that's fair. And I would add something else to it. That what is sustainable for one person is not sustainable for another, just like what is sustainable for one business is not sustainable for another. And so I'm glad you asked that. It pushes me towards the next factor, right? What are the valuable resources in your business, or what are the valuable resources in your personal life? Now, valuable resources, I'm not sure I've ever tried to flesh this out in a personal setting, but I think if we're going that direction, I would say, you as an individual, you have talents, you have interests, you have passions, and those should be part of what you take into account. You also have relationships. Just like in a business, you have your team. Team is one of the most critical resources that you have, if I can call it that helps you in your business. Well, you have your team outside of your business too, in your personal life, whether that's, spouse, partner, family, friends, social circles, professional circles, whatever that is. You have resources in your life that you should stop and think about and identify, right? If we're being really personal about it, you should probably also maybe, if it's your style, maybe do some gratitude practice around all those resources that you really have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you likely have a lot of resources that will help you to then define what your sustainable advantage is. How do I take those resources and create a lifestyle for me that I can live with long term, that I enjoy, that is the right balance of, pressure and success and leisure and, personal fulfillment, whatever those factors
Can I ask you
are.
just one question? So
Yes.
there's a popular saying on the internet of all these gurus that your network is your net worth. Is that something that you would agree with?
Generally, I think it's applicable. I think it's a statement that plays out in a lot. We see it play out. If you were in investment banking, and I'm sure that the people you surrounded yourself with had a very real impact on the success that you found in your business, right? Same with me. And so I think that's true. I don't think it's everything, but I think it's part of it. So you've just taken a business, kind of this business saying, and I think it slots really well into what we're saying here. That's one of your resources that you have, perhaps, to then help you identify your personal strategy.
Mm-hmm. And you're educated in so many fields. You're an engineer, you're an attorney, you're master of business administration, and much more, of course. But how important is or how valuable is this knowledge? And I think in your case also know-how to be part of your deployable value as an individual.
I mean, it's a great question. I hadn't given it thought that way, but putting it in context, I mean, those are some of my valuable resources, right? I've made friends in different circles because I've been through engineering and law and business and startups and stuff like that. So I've got different circles of friends. I've got different kind of repositories of knowledge and experience. No, I think those definitely come into play. Now, that might be one of my strengths. I really am a learner. I like to learn. I like to experiment. I like to see what happens, which might be a little unique for lawyers, right? They're much more risk averse than I am a lot of times. But those are some of the strengths that I have, which is why I'm pursuing the things I'm pursuing versus, other lawyer friends or engineer friends who are pursuing the things they're pursuing.
Another important question that is because of my conservative background. You said that you have a life partner for 30 years already. How important and how valuable is that? Would you consider when you would, let's say, analyze yourself that having a stable family is a deployable value resource?
I mean, I want to say yes, with the caveat that I haven't lived a different way. So I don't know what the alternative really is. It's kind of like when I tell a lot of startup founders, I'm like, hey, you don't really know what it's like to start a business until you've started it. It's like you don't know what it's like to have a kid until you've had a kid. You can like read the books and talk to your friends, but when you have that first kid in your life, you're like, oh, this is what it is, right? Now I get it, and so to experience it is to truly understand it. And I've been married for 30 years. I think I really understand, and I understand where I'm good and where I have room for improvement. I just want to put the caveat out there that I don't really know what the alternative life is. We'll call it the single, the unmarried, the divorced, the childless. Like those other things are not necessarily my situation. And so I know friend like I'm thinking of a good friend. He's an attorney, he's married, has no kids. I don't know the background behind why he has no kids, and that's not really my concern. But I would guess that he has different opportunities available to him because his situation is different. And his personal strategy probably leverages those different things. Like the probably the pretty obvious two are he probably has way more free time and probably more discretionary income out of his total than I do. A lot of my time goes to, trying to figure out how to fit in camping and mountain biking and movies and whatever with my kids and my family. And a lot of my money goes to those same places. So their differences is it a, I think just like I can make my situation, I can leverage my situation toward my own strategic goals. I think he can do the same, or another person who's a single mom, or never been married, or a young person, right, who's still has all that ahead of them. Like their person, each of our personal situations is so different that those I think are what we should think of as our valuable resources to then deploy towards creating a sustainable advantage, aimed at that leadership objective that we're going for within the competitive environment we're in. So
Yeah,
that's how
think
I
we
would
can
phrase that.
agree on one thing. It's important that your strategy encompasses what you have, not what you want, but what you have, and you should leverage what you have to your advantage. So if you have a family, you have a stability. That's an advantage. If you don't have a family, you have more, let's say, resources, at least more time available. So you should leverage that. So it's important that the strategy is adapted to your current situation. And if you are a startup, or if you work in an existing company, you should act a bit differently. If you want to go to the C-level position, there's a different strategy, and you should use your leverages different than if you have your own company, or if you're just starting out. You need to understand where you stand in the world. I think that's one of the keys to have a viable strategy, because else the strategy is just a wish list.
Yeah. No, I love that you said that. And that really ties back into why I gave so much thought to this, how strategy should be defined for businesses, because a framework it doesn't mean that every bit, like, let's figure out a strategy and then we'll apply that strategy to every business out there. I hear agencies talk about that. We have a strategy for, deploying your product launch or for gaining new followers. Well, that's not a strategy because you're trying to apply the same tactics to every single business out there when their circumstances, their objectives, their resources are all different. So it's not really strategy, right? So what you've said is, it really hits at the purpose of having a framework for strategy. It's broadly applicable, but in order to translate it from framework to strategy, you have to put all the individual inputs in there. And what you get out of that is going to be very unique. What you get out of that is going to be unique compared to what I get out of that, compared to what somebody else gets out of that.
Thank you. Before we finish, I would like to ask you for another favor. So what would you advise to our listeners that are probably somewhere in midlife, experiencing midlife crisis? What's your number one advice? Where should they start?
So I think it's always been easy for me. So as an attorney, I give lots of people advice and recommendations. So this should be easy, but I try to be really respectful of the fact that I know everyone's situation is different. I think the one thing that applies to everybody is you have to start taking action. You can't sit and think your way to a better lifestyle. You can't think your way through a midlife crisis. You have to take action. And I have a philosophy, having worked with a lot of innovators over the years. I've seen a lot of innovators who are really bright. They come up with these awesome ideas, but they get stuck because they're afraid of things. So I think there are kind of some standard fears that people run into, and there's just different varieties of fear. Fear is when you're thinking about the future and you fear what might happen in the future. Fear is never present based or past based. It's always future based. And so if you're in midlife crisis, I suspect you're thinking, what is my future going to look like, right? And if I don't do it, what's going to happen? So there's an aspect of fear to midlife crisis. And the only solution to fear that I'm aware of is action. Action brings the future into the present, and you can't have fear in the present, because once you take action, you already know the result. You might not like it, you might want something different, or you might love it, but you know it, so there's nothing to be afraid of. So I think people really need to, if somebody listens to this and they say, oh, I love that 5-factor framework, I want to apply it in my life, that's awesome. You have to get to the point where you do apply it. You take the action. Otherwise, it's just going to be a tool that goes unused. Even if you think through it, you write it on paper, like that's all good, but you got to start taking the actions towards implementing something in your life. That's how I think that's the only way to really reduce fears and build confidence, which is I think gonna get you to the other side of midlife crisis.
Jeff, thank you for these amazing insights. Thank you for everything you have shared with us. And thank you for being my guest tonight.
It's been my pleasure, Peter. Thanks so much for having me.